Coach, second episode of your very own podcast, Better Than I Found It. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Mikkel. How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's August 3rd, huge week for the Baylor Bears coming up. What we got?
Well, we've got several guys competing all around the country, actually. We have Kyle Jones on the Corn Ferry Tour at the Winco Foods Portland Open. So that'll be up in the upper Northwest. And then Jimmy Walker, the 2016 PGA champion. He won that year at Baltusrol. He'll be there competing at TPC Harding Park out in California at the PGA Championship. That's a great event, obviously the first major of the year, and we're real excited for Jimmy to get in there and go and try to win a golf tournament. He's already won before. And then so some of our current players are playing in the USAM, and that is at Bandon Dunes. So also kind of the upper Northwest. That's Colin Kober and Cooper Dossie, both seniors. Travis McEnroe, also a senior. Johnny Kiefer, a freshman this year, and Ryan Grider, who was a junior this year. So we have 5 players in the USAM, but it's a big week for Baylor Bears. Love to see some of those guys, really, really compete and do well this week.
Yeah, look out for their names and watch them on the telecast. Do you know if the USAM will be on TV this year too?
It will. I just don't know the days or times.
Yeah,
definitely.
So that starts on Monday the 10th. Those 5 guys from our current team place there. So we're excited to see all of our Baylor Bears play. But this podcast episode, we have a guest, Tosh Hays. He came in town to hang out with you, Coach McGraw, and hung out a little bit with me as well. Really great guy, talked a lot of coaching, shared some stories, and so we decided to sit down and record a podcast. Very first guest. What can you share about Tosh Hays for the listeners before we go to the interview?
Well, currently, Tosh is a PGA Tour instructor. He works with Robert Streb on the PGA Tour. Robert is also from Edmond, Oklahoma, and played his college golf at Kansas State University, but is playing the PGA Tour. In fact, played pretty well this week. But Tosh played high school golf for me back in the 1990s at Edmond North, and we even go back further than that, back into the 80s when I basically started becoming his teacher when he was a very young kid. And we just have a great history with Tosh. He's got a lot of energy, really a forward thinker, a great guy, and he was in town and shared his thoughts on this podcast. He's great to talk to.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and some good stories, a little bit of insight from his coaching and your own coaching. So without further ado, let's cut to the conversation with Tosh Hays.
Okay, Tosh, you and I have a long history going back a little more than 30 years. So welcome to my podcast here.
Hey, I'm honored. This is the second one, right?
It is, yeah. This is very new to me. I've kind of entered into the podcast world, but I'm loving every minute of it.
One thing about it, your guests can only go up from here.
Well, I think you'll be just fine. Honestly, I do. You've got as I recall, when I coached you, all those years ago, you had a great sense of humor and very smart kid too as well. So, but welcome to a podcast. Great to have you today. For those out there listening, Tosh played for me back in the 1990s at Edmond North High School, and I coached him in golf earlier than that before he got to high school.
Well, let's be fair. That's why I switched to Edmond North. I mean, and look, it was, and I'm honest with people about it to this day. I loved OCS. We just got done winning a state championship at OCS, but the Edmond High Schools had just split up, and you had just taken the job at North, and the opportunity to get to play for you. You had taught me how to play. And so the opportunity to get to play high school golf for you was just an opportunity I could not pass up.
Well, and it was a pretty good opportunity for me to get the best junior golfer in the state to transfer into my district.
Those were the down years as Oklahoma junior golf.
Well, pretty down, but that's okay. It was kind of an interesting thing. I remember very well the day at Kickingbird Golf Course when you came in and you met me in my office, which my junior golf office at Kickingbird was a closet underneath a stairwell, but I made the most of it, but it was great. But you came in and you said, Coach, it's official, my mom and dad have agreed, and I'm transferring from OCS to Edmond North this fall, and I just thought that was the greatest thing. Knew we had a good team anyway, but that solidified it. We were going to have a great team at that point.
And you might remember this, but one of the reasons that was a super hard decision for me is I at the time was having a real big phobia of public speaking, and look, I actually thought going to Edmond North might actually make it worse. But looking back, it was one of the best decisions I made because it helped me get over that. It helped make me feel more comfortable in those situations. And the move to Edmond North was a great life decision.
Yeah, it was good for you because I remember before that, if we were going to order a pizza out at the golf course, you didn't want to call the pizza place because you'd have to talk to an adult. That was a rough go.
It was a rough few years of school there.
I do remember you telling me that, and then about 30 minutes later, you said, "Hey, by the way, Coach, I really been struggling a little bit with my putting. Is there any way you could come out and watch me hit a few putts?" And so this would be like, I don't know, a college golf coach getting a commitment out of the number one player in the country, and they've got this great relationship going, and it's an awesome deal. And yes, I'd love to help you out. And then we went out onto the putting green, and I don't know, I probably worked with you for 10 or 15 minutes and gave you a few tips or a few pointers, and whatever I was saying wasn't working for you, and you were just moping and whining and just upset and angry. And finally I just said, that's it, Tosh. I've had it. I can't take this anymore. I'm going into the clubhouse. I thought I was teaching a champion, but apparently not. And you came in to my office maybe. Of course, that was a little cubby hole in a closet underneath a stairwell. You came into my cubby hole closet and you said, "Coach, I'm so sorry." And I said, "Well, yeah, I just wanted you to know I don't want to deal with that. That's not what you're going to be able to do when you're on my golf team." So I thought that was an interesting caveat. Because
what's sad is that's not the only time that you had to get on to me as a young player.
No, that's really... Are you talking about the Texas-Oklahoma Junior?
Absolutely. People still don't believe this really happened.
Well, people are also going to get an idea that you were just this little entitled, whimpering, whining little kid. You weren't that, but occasionally you got a little dark.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
In 1991... you were wanting to go play the Texas-Oklahoma Junior. What a great junior golf tournament, about 800 kids on several different golf courses. And you were going to test out your skills against the Texas kids. And there were a lot of good junior players in Texas. And so your parents gave me a certain amount of money, I don't know what it was, to drive you down there, to stay with you, feed you, get you to and from the golf course, to caddy for you. They paid me some money to make the whole trip. It was a very lucrative week for me financially. But also a good week for me. You were only 13, so this is way before you ever got to high school. And I remember we were playing the third round.
No, it was the second round.
Second round at Weeks Park Golf Course.
Front nine.
And played the back nine first, so it was the front nine, number 1, but it was a 10th hole. It was a drivable par 4. You could actually drive it on the green, but the bail was just to miss it right of the green because there was a water hazard left. And just to
preface this, the first round I'd shot 79. I doubled the first 3 holes, but we had started making a little bit of a comeback.
You were doing good.
A little bit of a comeback.
Hanging in there. Yeah. And he knows he's kind of in the hunt well before live scoring or scoreboards. And he hits this beautiful tee shot, and it kind of has a little draw, and it takes a couple of hops left and goes into the hazard. You are moaning and whining and griping and just being a little baby all the way down the fairway, and I've just about had enough here. So with the reality, he could still get the ball up and down. Just take a drop, get it up and down for a par. You're at the fringe.
I was not thinking that way.
No, you weren't in that frame of mind at the time. And so what happened was you chipped it up there to about 5 feet and missed the putt. So now you're actually at the point of almost, I'm not sure you said a cuss word, but you were in a rage. So you're walking over to the second tee box, the 11th hole. And I just put the bag down and started walking up the hill toward the clubhouse. And you didn't even notice until you got on the tee, and you see your bag and you don't see me. Where is he? And you look around to the left, and there I am walking up the hill. I hadn't said anything.
I had to tell the other guys in the group, hold on just a second.
Hold on.
Because they had caddies also.
I've got to go shag my caddy here. I got to pick up my caddy and bring him back.
I had to literally tell them, okay, just give me 1 second here.
So he runs up the hill. Mike, well, I don't think you called me Coach McGraw because I wasn't your coach.
Yeah,
hey, Mike, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, well, Tosh, I'm not carrying a bag for a kid that acts like that. There's just no way. That's ridiculous. That's embarrassing. I'm not doing it. I promise I'll get it together. This won't be a problem. I'll get it together. Well, you got it together because at the threat of having to carry your own bag is what I think it was.
Yeah, probably had a little bit with it.
The final round the next day we played at River Creek, which was kind of a little outside of Wichita Falls. and you were playing with Edward Lohr and Craig McAlpine, the two best players in Texas.
In Burke-Burnett, Texas.
Texas.
Well, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was filmed, by the way.
I did not know that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, it was a massacre, and Edward Lohr and Craig McAlpine were the guys that got massacred because you beat them that day. That trophy was as tall as you were. Crazy how big it was, but that was a good memory for me. But, those are a couple of the occasions where I felt like it's more important for me to be direct with you. And honestly, that was out of my wheelhouse in those days. I wasn't all that direct with people. I don't know if I just thought maybe Tosh can handle it or if this is such a case where he really needs it. But I think it's important for any coach to be able to do that. I don't know how I was able to muster that up with you in those days.
Well, the TO experience was definitely, because that first round started off so bad, starting to make a little bit of a comeback, and then what happened there in the second round, that was such an eye-opening week for me because from those last, 27, 26 holes, it was some of the best golf I'd played in my life. As a matter of fact, that last round was the first under par round I'd shot in a golf tournament. And it really showed me that the way you carry yourself on the golf course does have a direct correlation with the way you actually play. And I don't know if and again, I was only, I was 13 years old, and I was like any 13-year-old, I was emotional at times. But that really, really showed me that, yes, your outer actions do have an impact on your inner thoughts. And that was, bar none, one of the best lessons I learned as a junior golfer. And I think, even still, I realize that sometimes there are some lessons that are better when they're not from your parents. And that there's some things that when you hear it from your parents, you're just not going to buy into as much. And those type of lessons that you taught me, and again, these are some of the bigger lessons that we're talking about, but being around you on a daily basis, back then, I couldn't, it's hard to put into words, but back then I wanted to be around you every day. And I don't even know if you know this, but at Kicking Bird, the course where, we were at the time, I actually started getting the nickname from the other kids who were a little bit older. Remember, I was 12, 13, from some of the older 15 and 16-year-olds. They actually started calling me Little Mike. And now here's the thing, though. This is a true story. They were doing it at first to be like kids, to kind of, make fun. But once they realized that it was not having the effect, I wore that badge with honor. I was thrilled that they wanted to call me Little Mike. It didn't stick because they realized it wasn't.
You didn't fight them.
Yeah, it was not having the effect they wanted. They needed to understand that for me, I was thrilled to be called that. And so it definitely didn't, it wasn't a nickname that stuck because it didn't have the desired effect that they had for it.
I'm glad you said that. When I was working with you, I thought I was working with a future tour player. I thought, you wanted to be on the PGA Tour, and you were working hard to do that, and you ended up being a coach, which is what I think is an interesting segue from there to here. I wanted to be a player as well, and I ended up being a coach. So the fact that those lessons were taught to you, I know you've been able to use that. But let's talk a little bit about your coaching career right now, too, as well, because right now you're coaching at Oklahoma Christian High School, and you've won 2 state championships.
2 state championships,
yeah. And you've got a bunch of kids playing Division I golf, a bunch of kids playing college golf, period. It's great. And so talk a little bit about some of the experiences you had with me when you later did play for me and when I was working with you or whatever, that maybe some of that you might use today.
Well, I tell everybody that I teach or coach, and I'm also the director of junior instruction at Oak Tree Country Club, and whether I'm coaching them or teaching them, I tell them all the same thing, that my greatest asset as a teacher or coach is the fact that I was a player first. And I cannot tell you how many times I will be saying something, and it will immediately take me to a flashback of when you were telling me the exact same thing, maybe in a little different way.
Yeah.
But I have those flashbacks all the time. And the experiences that I had with you, and I'll be totally honest about it, I hope I can give the kids and the young players that I'm working with 1/10, just a fraction of what you were able to show me and provide to me when I was a young player. If I could give them 10% of what you gave me, I will consider myself a success as a teacher and a coach. That's how big the impact was that you had. Remember, neither one of my parents played golf. My dad was a baseball player and was a really good baseball player. He was really, he was actually the Milwaukee Braves back there. The Milwaukee Braves back then had shown interest in him. He broke his arm, and he was a pitcher, and his arm didn't heal correctly. And so, I was his baseball player. And so,
and your mom didn't play golf at all.
No. I mean, look. What's funny is, this weekend, they just got done playing the event where they use the Stableford scoring system, right? And so I was actually watching a couple of the early rounds. Mom loves to watch Robert when Robert's playing, and the Stableford system's, totally different scoring, right? And she actually brought you up. She said, "Oh no! If McGraw knew about the time I'm starting to learn actually how to do the scoring in golf,
they changed it." So I will tell that story right here because I'd never had this happen before, and it's never happened since. So I met Tosh when he was 9 or 10, and had seen him play junior golf tournaments, and for literally 10 years. And so we're playing the state championship at Cushing Country Club, Tosh's senior year, last high school tournament he's ever going to play, and we're on the final round, and we're leading. So it's just everything's set up for we're going to go out winners together. It's great. And his mom is in a cart. She's going to watch the 8 millionth golf tournament she's seen you play in 10 years. And so the first tee, you go down the hill and dogleg left. Then there's a par 3. And then the third green is right there next to the first tee. So you come right back to where you started. So I watch all 5 guys tee off, and Tosh is the 5th guy. And once you hit the tee shot on one, you're out of sight for a little while if you're standing on one tee, they're not going to see him. And then I started watching the 5 guy come through and the 4 guy come through. And I noticed that if you got above this pin on number 3, it was a 3-putt for sure. So just about as that 3rd guy's putting out or 4th guy's putting out, his mother drives up and she says, I said, "Well, how's Tosh doing so far?" She says, "Oh my gosh, he's great. He's 3 under par." I go, "Oh my gosh, now I really need to get down there because he's got all this adrenaline flowing. There's no way I'm going to let him hit a club that'll get above this flag." So I walk down there. I say, "Hey, Tosh, how you doing?" "Doing fine, Coach." "What do you got here?" I got 137 uphill into a teeny breeze. And he said, "I think it's just a nice little 8-iron. And I said, "Nope, it's a 9-iron max. There's no way it's more than a 9-iron. "Well, there's no way I get a 9-iron there." I said, "Well, I'm trying not to let you know that it is death going above this hole. So I'm just trying to talk you into staying below the hole." And you go, "Well, I don't know, Coach. I think it's really an 8-iron to get there." And I said, "Well, Tosh, I'm trying to keep you below the hole. And I know you got a lot of adrenaline from this great start." And he goes, "Great start? What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, your mom came up and she told me you're 3 under par." And she goes, "3 under par? I'm 1 over." I said, "Okay, well, I guess we ought to talk about this."
Oh, God love her.
Hit the 9-iron anyway. So what had happened was you had hit the T-ball on one, you got out of sight, couldn't see you, and you chili dipped, 3 in a row, and then hold the other pitch shot for a bogey. So you've had 3 chili dips, but hold out for a bogey.
Well, I hit it in the stuff.
Yeah, don't worry about where you hit it.
I hit it
in her mind, every time you chipped it in from off the green, it was an eagle. Every single time. Because you had done it on a par 5 one time.
Yeah.
So she thought, well, it doesn't matter how many strokes you take. If you chip in from off the green, it's an eagle. And then on the second hole, you pulled it into the left bunker, left it in the bunker, and then hold that for a par. So you've holed out 2 shots from off the green. She thought that was a birdie. She thought you were 3 under par. And so 2 weeks later, when we were celebrating at our end-of-the-year banquet, I told that story. And poor Ann, I just felt terrible for your mom, but she had to be taken down a notch here because she'd watched golf for 10 years and couldn't know the difference.
She did. I mean, look, she's the type. I mean, she was always working during those days, and so I mean, I promise you, during the round, at some point, she had gotten distracted with something else.
Yeah,
she
for
was.
Sure.
I mean, that was. But look, like I said, both of my parents, and I look back on it, and again, this is also coming from a teacher and coach's perspective. I look back on it, and I think my parents not playing golf in a way might have been the biggest blessing in the world. I really do. There were times when I thought, oh, that kid has more information than I do because his parents golf. His dad played. But looking back on it, my parents, once my dad bought into golf, and he did fairly early. He really did. He at first he was trying to figure out why you stopping and playing baseball to play this silly game. But once he bought into it, my parents, because they didn't know golf, all they could do was offer unconditional support, encouragement, and love, right? And looking back at that, I think that was a bigger advantage than had my dad been a PGA Tour player. And they were super supportive. But because of that, what I learned, about the game, I learned from you. The lessons that you taught me. And look, it was more than that. I think you would agree. We also kind of, and maybe I'm building me up a notch here. I think we kind of hit it off as friends also. You had been a avid collector of old golf stuff. And I think I was visiting your apartment or something, maybe with a couple of our other buddies, Todd and Steve McCollum, and I saw this amazing collection of the history of our game, and I fell in love with it the first night I saw it. Remember, it's the old decanters that you had.
Sure.
But then one of the biggest gifts that you gave me is you taught me about Ben Hogan.
Oh yeah,
that was a game changer because, look, my ability was one thing, but my work ethic was another. And once you kind of introduced me to Ben Hogan, remember, back then, now you can go to a bookstore and there's 20 books about Ben Hogan. Back then, there
couldn't
were
get much information.
Yeah, there wasn't.
Nothing on YouTube.
Gene Gregstone had his book, Hogan the Man Who Played for Glory. There was Jimmy DeMerit's book that was super hard to find. But it's not like there was a ton of information back then about him. But you had a wealth of knowledge about this guy. And I fell in love with the golfer that Ben Hogan was. And look, I even wrote a paper. My paper in college was why I thought Ben Hogan was the greatest player of all time, and I, made the argument that he lost, basically 5 years of primetime golf to the war and to his car wreck.
There's no doubt. I probably affected that.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, sure. Absolutely.
But let me tell a little story on. So Tosh was, I think, 13, and then those days the AJGA also had a 14 and under age group you could play in.
That's right. Yeah.
And it kind of played at the same tournament, only about 15 or 20 kids, but you got to play.
Sure.
And so we were at Las Colinas in Dallas, and I told Tosh, who teed off at 8 o'clock in the morning, I said, now, Tosh, after you finish, I want you to grab a quick lunch because we're going to walk back out and watch Tiger Woods. Why would I want to watch Tiger Woods? I said, because he's going to be the greatest junior golfer ever. You need to see this. Yeah, but you couldn't even understand why I should have you go out there and watch him.
Well, can I explain that? And I've explained, because people have asked me, because Tiger was older than me, so I never had to play directly against him. But he was at probably 4 or 5 tournaments that I played at. He was there. As a matter of fact, I got some pictures with him at trophy presentations when after the event. People ask me, well, what was he like? The only reason back then I didn't make a bigger effort to get to know him, or actually any of the people, is I thought I was going to be playing against him the rest of my life. And that's just the way I thought. I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent, I thought I don't need to make a special effort to get to know this guy now because I'm going to play against him.
Well, I respect that,
but you have to admit that's a pretty cool attitude.
It's a great attitude. However, Ben Hogan and Byron Nelson both went out to watch him that day.
I totally understand.
Are you kidding me?
I totally understand. But you gotta appreciate where I was coming from.
I definitely appreciate hey, I'll be playing against these guys.
It wasn't a disrespect thing.
Of course not.
I didn't feel any hurry to get to know him because I got my whole life to do it.
I got you. That makes sense. But I would remind you, Ben Hogan and Byron Nelson were there. But I will also remind you, you were mad at me for several days because you were so tired because you had to walk 18 more holes that day in the heat, which was my fault, but that's okay.
No, and look, and like I said, I had tons of heat because, like I said, people, obviously kids now that I coach, they want, what was Tiger like as a junior? And I said, well, I wasn't around him that much. He was quiet and shy, but I didn't make a huge effort. And not just, by the way, it wasn't just Tiger. Other players that are playing on tour now.
Yeah.
That I just, again, it was just, I thought I had plenty of time. I was going to be playing with them forever.
Well, I was always trying to give guys another experience, and I thought if there's we were playing in Abilene, Texas one time in the mid-'80s, late 80s, 87, I think 88, and I had my guys down there competing, and I actually remember going over and following Phil Mickelson when my players were over on the other 9. It's like, I want to see this guy hit a golf shot, and it was pretty amazing to see that. But I was always trying to give them other experiences that I thought would enhance what you were doing. having said that, so I coached you when you were young, obviously, and now you're coaching the game to regular amateur golfers, to junior golfers, to high school golfers. You coach the game of golf. I'm going to go through one more lesson that I taught you that I think is important. It might seem a little cliche or old-fashioned or whatever, but tell the lesson about the boy, and we obviously won't mention the name, but a young man that you played with that was cheating in a junior golf tournament.
Yeah, again, and by the way, I'm sure other young players have this similar experience, and again, this is where I hear myself when I'm talking to somebody. I hear the words that you told me back then, but yeah, I was playing with somebody, and I had witnessed it and noticed that he had done some stuff, but I can't remember exactly. I think I had still maybe beaten him or something, and so I didn't worry too much about it, and signed our scorecards and it was all done. And after the round, you overheard me talking to somebody else about it. And I mean, you could not have pulled me up from that chair fast enough and taken me into a side room, and you tore into me. And again, I was 12, 13, I was a kid. You learn these lessons. The thing you really impressed me that I hadn't thought about at the time, I had only thought, again, like a lot of kids, how that situation affected me. Well, since I'm going to beat him, this doesn't affect me. It never dawned on me until you said it, that my job as a golfer is to protect the field. And that never even crossed my mind. I learned that lesson, and that's a lot, they talk about, a lot of these lessons when you learn them, a lot of them you have to learn the hard way. And you really, really, you let me have it, and in a good, because you basically said to me that during the round, it's your job to protect the field. After the round, if you talk about it, it's gossip. And I've never forgotten that sense that, there's, if you're going to be a golfer, a competitive golfer, you have a duty when you're playing to protect the field. And that's your time to take care of it if it happens. Your time to take care of it is on the golf course while you're playing before the scorecard gets signed. If you don't do it then, it never happened. It never happened. For sure. If you don't take care of it then. And so, and again, these are lessons that we're talking kind of about the big ones, but I also want to impress upon the fact we're hitting kind of all these high water marks where, you got a little stern with me or what. There were lessons you were teaching me, though, every day, and I honestly think that is one of the biggest gifts of mentorship is that these lessons come from experiences, everyday life, little experiences that you're not even expecting. And even sometimes at the time you don't even realize that, hey, I'm getting some great mentorship here. You don't even realize it sometimes till later on. Hey, that was a pretty valuable nugget I got right there. Like when, again, we're talking about all these big ones, but the small ones. When you gave me a copy of Gene Grexton's book on, Hogan, the Man Who Played for Glory, I had no, and you probably maybe didn't even know what kind of impact it was going to have on me. I had no idea when I cracked that book open that was going to affect the way I practice for the rest of my junior golf career. For sure. And so there's little things that happen.
By the way, the interesting part about that is I don't do as much of the Ben Hogan indoctrination anymore because it's so far removed from this generation.
Sure, absolutely.
So if I'm talking to Cooper Dossie on our golf team currently right now, hey, let me tell you about Ben Hogan. He's going to go, dude, coach, can you tell me about Tiger Woods? Or can you tell me about Justin Thomas? It's. I understand it's not as relevant. It really wasn't relevant in your days, but I was holding on for dear life.
Yeah, no, and there's no question. And me and you even talk about current tour players we see, and we say, hey, who reminds us the most of Hogan? And there's no question that is very far removed. But to me, he had a certain mystique about him that's never been matched. Never been matched. And whether you agree with the technique that he had, it wasn't so much his technique. I mean, let's remember, I'm talking about these books about Hogan's life. It's not like I was a super huge fan of his 5 Lessons book. I think it's a good book, but it's more about his persona on the golf course, the way he practiced, his work ethic, and all the stuff he overcame. I mean, look, the guy nearly died. I mean, you talk about the greatest comeback in golf. I think it's the greatest comeback in sports. There's been some stuff that have rivaled it recently, but it's a pretty amazing story.
It was an amazing story. And it had been in a day of social media, it would have been really blown up. It was just, you kind of heard it in mystic fashion. There was a movie about it with some pretty poor acting, honestly. There was a couple of books written, but years later. It wasn't like it would be today. But let's talk about that, because you were talking about maybe one of the top 3 or 4 players that's ever played the game, and played a game that you and I both aspired to play for a living. That's what we were going to do, and neither one of us were able to achieve a professional, of some success, a professional career, but we both ended up being coaches. And so I want to talk today about one of the players you work with who does play for a living, and his name is Robert Streb. So if you could kind of take us through a little bit about how you got to know Robert initially, how your relationship with him has developed, and just kind of working with a tour player. What's that like?
Sure. When I first became a golf professional, one of the first good players I started working with was a young man by the name of Zach Reynolds that played golf at Oklahoma State. He was a good young player. And I think Robert would absolutely tell you this now, that Robert respected Zach. I don't know if looked up to is the right word, but he definitely respected him, saw talent there, and it was his family that went to Zach's family and said, okay, who do you suggest to work with Robert? And I had been working with Zach since he was a sophomore in high school, and so that's how I ended up with Robert through the work I'd done with Zach Reynolds. Robert was a hockey player. Robert had played junior league hockey with Sam Bradford. Definitely had some uniqueness about his golf swing. But again, one of the best things that you always kind of stressed when you were working with me, and again, it's not like you had to say this, it was just the way you taught, it's what I learned, that less was more. And thankfully that carried over to me as an instructor. And so Robert did a lot of unique things. He used a 10-finger grip that, again, I looked at the grip. And
he still does.
He still does, yeah, he still does. But if you just look at his hands without him lifting the club up, his hands look fine on the golf club. They look just fine to me. And look, there had been other players, everybody knows of the Bob Rosbergs, 10 fingers. But I had played junior golf with Ed Lohr, and Ed Lohr used the 10-finger grip. And Ed was one of the best ball strikers. I mean, Ed hit it great when we were junior golfers. It's fantastic. And so I just saw no reason to mess with his grip. And so really let a lot of Robert's natural ability kind of guide us what we did with his golf swing. And look, Robert, in high school, Robert was a nice player. But, I mean, you look at the players that was on his high school team, there were times he wasn't even the best player on his high school team. Yep. And then he went to college, gained some distance, but the biggest thing he gained in college was confidence. He really, really did start seeing, hey, you know what, I think I can play this game a little bit. And really got good in college.
Were you still working with him all that time?
All that time, yeah. And I'd been teaching at Kicking Bird, and I left Kicking Bird to take the director of the program director for the First Tee of Oklahoma City. And I wasn't teaching quite as much because I was working that program, but I still had several players that I was working with on a regular basis, and Robert was one of them. And Robert just kept having success. And, it's like a snowball going downhill. The more success that he had, the more it helped his confidence. And one of the things I'm most proud about with Robert is we never overcomplicated things with his golf swing. And look, Robert doesn't want to. Robert, again, you have young players ask, well, okay, what's it take to get on the PGA Tour? What's it take to play at that level? One of the biggest things that I have seen spending time with Robert out there is that one of the biggest things, you just have to own whatever your golf game is. You have to own it. Whatever your golf game is, you've got to own it. You've got to believe in it. And if one player tries to play like another player, it's a disaster. You've got to own what your strengths are. You've got to own your game. And Robert's one of the best I've seen at being able to do that. Look, the PGA Tour has lots of different definitions of success out there. And I look at Robert, he's getting, 8-9 years on tour. And
he finished 5th yesterday.
He did, he started off kind of slow yesterday, but he finished great with, several birdies and had Robert, like any professional career, he's had ups and downs, but he is really, really, every time Robert's back's been against the wall, he's always responded. And that says a lot about, look, I think one of the greatest things for him as a golfer is that he played hockey before, because he knows what being tough is all about, right? I mean, he played a sport where you have to be tough to play. And I think that's actually served him well as a professional golfer. He's super, super tough. And like I said, every time he's had to, he has responded. And look, getting to work with him has been, let's put it this way. I'm extremely proud to be a swing coach, but I'm honored to be his friend.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Robert's such a really good dude. And I didn't have an opportunity to recruit him. I think can't really remember. I think we had our recruiting class finished at Oklahoma State when I was an assistant. I'm not sure why we didn't give Robert more, but I remember Bob Tway telling me, he said that Robert Streb's going to be a great player. And then he also told me, he said, Robert was a senior when Kevin was a freshman, I believe. And he said it was amazing how Robert had just been a great mentor for Kevin that freshman year, because Kevin really was a basketball player trying to learn how to be a golfer.
Sure, yeah.
And Robert kind of showed him the way and was such a great leader. And so, one thing, he was a tough kid who had played another sport, which was great. And two, he was a great leader for a team. And I know at Kansas State he was a great leader.
Yes.
He did something that's pretty rare. He qualified twice for the national championship as an individual.
Right.
That doesn't happen very often. I've seen it happen a couple other times. Kyle Stanley did it at Clemson, and maybe one or two others. But qualifying as an individual is tough, and he was able to do that.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. No, he is. And again, I've known him since, I've worked with him since he was in high school, and so I've known him all these years. And seeing him turn into the husband, the dad that he is, he really understands that, his legacy is not what he's going to do what he's going to do on a golf course. It's the two little kids that he's raising into to be a young man and a young lady. So it's been, like I said, it's been a true honor to get to spend the time with him that I've been able to.
Well, that's great. Well, tell me, is there anything that surprised you about coaching a PGA Tour player? And we've got just a few more minutes here probably, but just...
Yeah, I mean, look...
Anything that you were surprised at?
They work extremely hard to get to that level. And I can remember the first couple of events that I went with Robert, and I got to spend some time at the event with him in the locker room and what have you. I texted my high school team, and I said, guys, let me just tell you, you want to do whatever you can to get out here, because this is a nice life and a good gig if you can get it. This is a pretty special thing. And again, they've earned it. They've worked their tails off to get to that level, but it's a pretty special deal once you're there. And so I told my guys, hey guys, I'm just telling you, keep working hard, keep doing the right things, because you want to be out here if you can, because and kind of go back to kind of what I said earlier, is the variety of players out there. And again, I said it once, but I'll say it again. There are so many definitions of success on the PGA Tour. And that's the other thing, is that it's not, we all know about the Tiger Woods, the Phil Mickelsons, we see those, but there are so many players that have found a way to make golf their livelihood by owning what they do. And that I guess is what's really, again, and I don't mind mentioning, because the other player that was in contention, Troy Merritt. Troy Merritt's a perfect example. By the way, Troy Merritt's had the same swing coach forever also.
Yeah.
Troy is another one that I've come to respect a ton. He has found a way. He doesn't hit it super far. He's amazing putter, amazing short game, right? Doesn't have a ton of distance, but he has found a way, and he's had a tremendous career on the PGA Tour as well. And I guess those are the type of players that as I've done this more, that I guess I just really, really have a lot of admiration for. That maybe the game didn't come quite as easy to them as some other players, and I don't want to discount, what the top players have done. But these guys, I don't know if you want to call them maybe kind of the blue collars of the PGA Tour. I've really, really, really come to have a huge amount of respect for those.
Yeah, you wouldn't pick Robert out off a practice tee and say, that guy's going to play pro golf for 10, 15, 20 years.
I don't think Troy Merritt either.
No,
I mean,
for sure.
And I love that. I love these guys that have just, they found a way, and it wasn't by getting over technical or over mechanical with golf swing. That's not the way they.
So you wouldn't consider yourself a over technique kind of guy.
I learned from you, so you tell me.
Well, I would say if I gave you any sort of skill for teaching the game of golf or teaching the golf swing, it was less is more, like Absolutely. You said earlier. And
by the way, as a instructor, I know I lose students because of that. I mean, there's no question. Absolutely. There are going to be times I'm going to lose students. But the thing is, if I tried to teach a way that's not true to myself, I'd be a disaster as a teacher, right? I have to teach, just like players have to own their golf games, I have to own the way I teach also. And so I know there's going to be students. I've lost students because of that. I understand. That's fine. And I have no ill will toward anybody that doesn't think I'm the right answer for their golf game. That's fine. But I have to stay true to what I believe.
No, that's good. I don't believe I'm the answer for everybody as far as being a college coach. I'm not that for everybody, but I am that for some people. Yeah. And I think that I've always said this, and I believe it, and I think it goes with the less is more from earlier. But there's a real genius in saying less and doing less and getting more out of it. Sure. There's a genius in there. And so you've taken Robert, who has a unique action, a unique move, and you've allowed him to continue to be an athlete that he was before, and you've allowed him to continue to play pro golf. You haven't impeded his progress. He's done great, and I applaud you for that, because it's kind of difficult to get to that spot, because sometimes you have to check your ego, and you do. So. Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed having you here today. This has been great catching up, and I apologize for some of the stories I told on you. But as I said, if I had a 20-hour podcast, we could get to all of those if we.
Hey, I have no problem us talking about those, because again, they help shape me. And hey, I was a kid like anybody else. I was an emotional kid, and but I learned those lessons, and I do think if you say anything about it, I did take those lessons to heart, and
I like that.
By the time when I would learn something, I'd really take it, I'd apply it, and really would learn from it. And
I also remember you being pretty mad at me at times, but that was okay.
At times,
came with the territory.
But that's what it was when I considered you like family, and when you with family members, you're going to have times like that. You really are, and but I just cannot stress enough, every single man. Remember, just when we would get to go on those little antique excursions, right? Every single moment that I got to spend with you, I knew I was really blessed and fortunate.
Yeah, those were great days. I appreciate that. Well, thank you, Tosh, for coming on the podcast today.
This was great. This was awesome.
I think you're doing a lot of what the title of this podcast is called. It's called Better Than I Found It. And I appreciate all you're putting into the game of golf and all that you do for golf.
It's been an honor. It really has been. That's great.
Well, thanks, Tosh.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tosh, for coming on. We appreciate the stories and your insight. If you'd like to reach out to Tosh to say thank you, or reach out to him to get in touch with him, he can be found at Twitter. His handle is at 4JR Golfers. That's FORJR Golfers. He can also be reached through email, which is 4juniorgolfers@AOL.com. All spelled out in all one word, 4juniorgolfers@AOL.com. Thank you for listening to this edition of Better Than I Found It. Please subscribe to get all future episodes of the podcast directly to your feed. The very best way to stay up to date on our program, Baylor Men's Golf, is through our social media. We're present on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle on Twitter and Instagram is @BaylorMGolf. Follow the program there for all updates on our current and former players, so go check us out. You can also find Coach McGraw on social media. His handle is @BearCoachMcGraw on both Instagram and Twitter, and my own handle is @MikkelGolf. Until next time, sick and bears.